Ever since what feels like the dawn of time, FIFA have been embroiled in controversies ranging from corruption to moral misconduct. Welcome to Halftime Football, where today we'll be going over a range of issues which indisputably prove that FIFA are the worst major sporting organisation in the world. Now, the first thing I want to talk about with FIFA is the thing that's most relevant today, the Palestine debacle. As we know, following the Russian invasion, Ukraine have been afforded loads of specialist treatment, loads of peace signs, and Russia have been banned from all footballing competitions. These are all relatively logical ideas, but all the hypocrisy behind it is insane. If we look at the greatest war conflicts in the world right now, the Israel-Palestine war sort of stands out. This began in the middle of the 1960s, and loads of Palestinian lives have been taken by Israeli soldiers and bombs. However, Israel were not given the Russian ban treatment whatsoever. In fact, they were afforded the luxury of being able to switch from competing in the Asian Confederation to the European one in the late 1970s, and they still play all their qualifiers and tournament matches there to this day. I also find it so perfectly ironic that Israel were able to boycott their match against Russia the other day over international conflicts and human rights concerns. You just have to laugh. Anyway, as for Palestine, well, players and fans who display their support for the region are fined and sanctioned as opposed to the Ukrainians who are widely celebrated. Maybe this isn't particularly a FIFA issue, but they do absolutely nothing to correct the double standard. Also, in 2007, when Palestine weren't permitted to leave the Gaza Strip in order to play Singapore, they were simply awarded a 3-0 defeat, unlike Ukraine, who were allowed to delay their Qatar World Cup qualifiers for months until they could play them just last week. Anyway, moving on to Qatar itself and more so the corruption behind it, and to me it's incredibly surprising that no one's been arrested over the awarding of the World Cup to Russia and the World Cup to Qatar. It's no real secret that top FIFA officials who have voting rights when it comes to World Cup host selection have received several bribes. In 2020, the US Department of Justice filed an indictment which shows that former FIFA Vice President Jack Warner allegedly received over $5 million in bribes from Russian officials to sway his vote. Another FIFA executive, Rafael Salguero, who's recently been charged with money laundering and racketeering misdemeanors, also received $1 million worth of bribes which made him vote for Russia to host the 2018 World Cup. As for Qatar's hosting, Nicolas Leoz, the ex-president of CONMEBOL, as well as former Brazilian Football Confederation president Ricardo Teixeira received bribes to help award the 2022 World Cup to the Gulf nation. And these allegations are just from one report, God only knows how many more there are. Several other reports have shown officials from places like Africa, the Caribbean, they've all also taken bribes to help Russia and Qatar. Beyond the bribes as well, the last 3 World Cup host selections have all been utterly shambolic given circumstances. Brazil was undergoing social unrest for several years, yet they were still awarded the hosting privilege, which took government money to the tune of $4 billion away from important social causes as facilities had to be built. Meanwhile, Russia, well, they're led by lunatics who are particularly fond of invasion, and they were caught up in a doping scandal before the tournament, yet they were still allowed to host and compete without any problems at all. As for Qatar, well, it's very nuanced. Whether it's human rights violations or moving the entire tournament to December, I'm sure you've heard it all anyway, so I won't go into depth on it. Either way, the hosting rights for recent and future World Cup competitions have been extremely dodgy, but we're yet to see an investigation completed on them, so this scandal is far from over. We could soon see the end as well, as a Swiss prosecution team have been undergoing an investigation on the bidding processes since 2015. The thing is though, it's not like bribery and corruption is a recent thing when it comes to FIFA. Another major bribery scandal was one that unfolded in the 1990s. This occurred between the marketing firm International Sport Leisure, or ISL, ex-FIFA president João Havelange, and Ricardo Teixeira, who I mentioned earlier also took Qatari bribes. Anyway, Havelange is a man who's credited with sort of revolutionizing FIFA as a sporting agency, but in this case, he alongside Teixeira are alleged to have taken up to $23 million in bribes from ISL between 1992 and 2000, who in exchange will be able to buy and sell broadcasting rights to the World Cup. Both Havelange and Teixeira were found guilty of morally and ethically reproachable conduct. Another scandal in a similar vein arose in 2011, this time involving the aforementioned ex-FIFA Vice President Jack Warner, as well as FIFA executive Mohammed bin Hammam, who was a key official in Qatar's World Cup bid. Warner and bin Hammam allegedly held a secret meeting between themselves and loads of representatives from the Caribbean Football Union, during which bribes were offered in order to sway the upcoming FIFA presidential election and allow bin Hammam to take the office from Sepp Blatter. Warner and bin Hammam sort of exploited the system whereby they offered extra developmental money and projects in the respective nations of the people they bribed, alongside the plain cash, of course. Both of them were found guilty, and Warner stepped down from his role in disgrace, while bin Hammam was kicked out of anything to do with FIFA. It's also funny how Sepp Blatter was incredibly outraged by this, when he himself is in fact strongly accused of buying the 1998 FIFA presidential election by giving cash in brown envelopes, and the president of Somali football backed the claim, saying he was given $100,000 to vote for Blatter. What's even worse is the fact that Blatter didn't even outright deny the claims. He said the extra money was for the developmental projects, much like what Warner and bin Hammam did 13 years later. You may notice a pattern, by the way. Some of the places I've mentioned, the Caribbean, Africa, these guys are the ones most targeted by bribes. See, in FIFA's voting systems, every country's vote counts the same. It doesn't depend on footballing status or anything else like that. High-ranking officials have noticed that they can be incredibly exploitative, and they target these officials because the additional revenue will be incredibly helpful to the development of their own nation. High-end nations are usually never bribed, as they also somewhat have more standing in legal discussions, which could cause more issues for the person making the bribe. In short, these officials love to take advantage of representatives from less developed countries. However, let's take a look at the biggest corruption scandal of all in 2015, where everything seemingly boiled over for FIFA. While several FIFA officials were preparing to attend a FIFA Congress meeting, their hotel in Zurich was raided on the 27th of May 2015, and 14 former and current officials were indicted on several charges and set to be extradited to the US. These arrests were made on the basis of rampant, systemic and deep-rooted corruption within FIFA, and the indictment involved 47 counts, all relating to money or corruption scandals. Several documents and pages of data were seized, and the report is so vast, so I'll only go through some of the major scandals. Chuck Blazer, the former CONCACAF president, decided to cooperate with the investigation, and he stated that he took bribes for broadcast rights to the CONCACAF Gold Cup 5 times, and he also accepted bribes relating to Morocco's 1998 World Cup bid and South Africa's 2010 World Cup bid. A separate South Africa World Cup bribery incident involved former South African President Thabo Mbeki, who allegedly struck a $10 million deal with Sepp Blatter as part of a scheme to support Caribbean football development, which immediately seemed suspicious because it was Jack Warner that was going to receive the money at the end of the transaction. This was uncovered through email conversations between Blatter's Secretary General, Jerome Valcke, and a South African minister. Further digging into the payment uncovered the fact that Warner obviously didn't use the money for Caribbean football development, rather he used millions to pay off personal loans and up to $5 million to help a Trinidadian supermarket chain in a different money laundering scheme. Warner has also been caught up in a scandal which shows that his family travel agency marked up ticket prices for Trinidadian, English, Mexican and Japanese supporters almost threefold at the 2006 World Cup, and Trinidadian players have also accused Warner of withholding their appearance bonuses from that World Cup. Also, you may have seen recently that Sepp Blatter and Michel Platini have been in court, and to be honest, it shines even more lights of disgrace over FIFA as an organisation. In this case, Blatter is alleged to have unlawfully arranged a payment of 2 million Swiss francs from FIFA's coffers into Platini's pocket. This payment conveniently came just before the 2011 FIFA presidential election, which seems to have been full of controversy, and the payment was made as Platini was seen as someone who could have significant impact on the European voters, as he was the president of UEFA. Blatter and Platini were immediately ousted from their roles and given a ban of 8 years from anything to do with football. In all, over $150 million was found to be involved in corrupt wrongdoings by high-ranking officials, leaders of broadcasting firms, and even Nike, who were accused of paying $40 million just to secure their place as Brazil's main kit sponsor for the 2014 World Cup. All the violations took place over 3 decades, and most of them involved CONMEBOL and CONCACAF, since it was an American-led investigation, so God only knows what other affairs FIFA have been meddling in all over the world. Elsewhere, of course, there are loads of other accusations for things like sexual misconduct, corruption, and general moral misdemeanors, but all we have right now are tips from whistleblowers and ongoing investigations, so who knows what's going to come out in the near future, but I think there's still a lot to be uncovered. But for me, generally the main question was, why are FIFA so corrupt? Well, perfectly, sports governance expert Roger Pielka explained it perfectly in an interview with Vox. Pielke stated, "One of the biggest things which many people don't really get is that FIFA isn't a business, it's not an international organisation like the WHO for example, and it's not governmental. It's basically a members club, but it's a members club that's hit the big time. FIFA however has gotten to the point where in terms of scale, it has the characteristics of a governmental organisation or a big business. We have rules for how those organisations are supposed to behave. The fact that FIFA has gotten so big without any of those rules is really what's led to its corruption. Other than that, there's the big problem of the developmental money which I mentioned earlier, which is basically a loophole for bribery. FIFA officials can promise extra money for footballing purposes, but we all know it's not used for that. It's more likely used to secure votes and keep the top ranking officials in power. As for the solution, well, realistically this problem will never be solved. As long as there's money involved, FIFA will always be corrupt. As an organisation, they're going to continue to bring the integrity of the beautiful game into disrepute. Hopefully though, soon a lot of these investigations will finally conclude and put FIFA to the sword and maybe spring us in a direction of change, but for now that's all a pipe dream. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. Thank you very much for watching. If you did make it this far, please be sure to like and subscribe. Let me know what you think about FIFA down below, and as well as any other future ideas you'd like to see on the channel, and I'll see you next time.